While nobles eventually shifted to feather beds as a status symbol, many continued to keep a straw bed for summer use or for times when their backs troubled them. This simple approach to bedding matched perfectly with their gentle approach to starting each day. Long before the jarring beeps of alarm clocks, medieval people mastered the art of waking up naturally. Their secret? They didn't fight their body's natural rhythms, they worked with them. Instead of forcing themselves awake at arbitrary times, they let the sun, sounds, and their own internal clocks guide them, an intricate system of morning bells that served as the community's timekeeper. Unlike modern alarms that shock you awake, these bells followed predictable patterns that people's bodies learned to anticipate. The first bell would ring at dawn, whether that was 4 a.m. in summer or 7 a.m. in winter. But medieval folks didn't just rely on bells, they had an impressive array of natural wake-up methods. Rooster keeping wasn't just for farmers. Town records show that urban households often kept roosters specifically as living alarm clocks. One merchant sued his neighbor because their rooster was excessively enthusiastic and crowed an hour before everyone else's. The medieval body seemed to adapt well to this natural waking system. One physician's guide notes that those who wake with the sun rise with clearer minds than those roused by artificial means. They might not have understood sleep cycles, but they'd stumbled upon a fundamental truth about natural wake patterns. Monastery records provide fascinating insights into natural waking practices. Monks developed a system called gradual awakening, where they would begin stirring about an hour before they needed to rise. The first monk to wake would start gentle activities, soft footsteps, quiet prayers that would gradually rouse the others. One monastery's rules specifically praised the gentle riser who wakes his brothers with kindness. The practice of natural waking influenced architecture too. Medieval builders positioned beds to catch the morning sun, with sleeping chambers often facing east. Some wealthy homes had special windows designed to direct the first light onto sleepers' faces. Windows were strategically placed to catch the morning chorus of birds, nature's gentlest alarm clock. Working hours adapted to this natural waking pattern. Instead of rigid start times, medieval workdays began when workers naturally arrived, usually within an hour of sunrise. It shows how flexible starting times are based on seasons and natural light. The absence of strict wake-up times created interesting social patterns. Fewer morning-related disputes than you might expect. When everyone operated on natural time, being late had a different meaning. One judge's ruling dismissed a case about morning tardiness, stating that the sun and the body's readiness, not the clock, determined the proper time to begin. Medieval parents had different concerns about their children's sleep too. Rather than battling to wake kids for school, medieval children typically started their days naturally. Teaching often began at variable times, especially in winter. Even warfare adapted to natural waking patterns. Military records show that armies would often delay morning movements until troops had naturally awakened. One commander's memoir says that soldiers who wake by their own accord fight better than those shaken awake. Though he did add that this practice made surprise dawn attacks particularly effective. The natural waking system wasn't without its challenges. Some jobs required specific early start times, like bakers who needed pre-dawn hours to have bread ready at sunrise. These workers developed creative solutions like going to bed extra early or using multiple shorter sleep periods. Patients were allowed to wake naturally unless medical treatment required otherwise. One hospital's guidelines specifically prohibited waking sleeping patients, noting that the body heals best when it wakes of its own accord. This natural approach to waking meant medieval people rarely experienced that familiar modern panic of oversleeping. Without the concept of being late, sleep was more peaceful. One medieval saying captured it well: the sun never fails to wake those who trust it. The gentle transition from sleep to wakefulness wasn't the only natural aspect of medieval slumber. These people had other tricks up their sleeves, ones that came straight from their gardens. Instead of sleeping pills, people relied on carefully crafted herbal remedies backed by generations of practical experience. These weren't random plants thrown together. Medieval healers had developed sophisticated herbal combinations for different types of sleep problems. In the 1400s, it revealed detailed sleep gardens, where monks grew specific combinations of herbs. One particular garden in Yorkshire contained 15 different varieties of sleep-promoting plants. The monastery shows how they supplied these herbs to the local community, with one amusing note about a merchant who claimed their chamomile was better than any sermon for sending him to sleep. The Knight's Comfort provides intricate details about sleep remedies. Its author, a monk, documented hundreds of herbal combinations, complete with harvesting instructions and patient outcomes. He was particularly proud of his Peaceful Dreams blend, which combined lavender, chamomile, and a mysterious herb he called Star's Breath, likely modern-day borage. Lavender topped the list of popular sleep aids, but not just as a pleasant scent. Medieval healers used it in specific combinations, lavender mixed with rose petals for anxiety-related sleeplessness, or with chamomile for those who had racing thoughts at night. One apothecary's notebook contains a complaint about customers trying to haggle over lavender prices, noting that they'll spend a fortune on ale but pinch pennies on peaceful sleep. The preparation of these remedies followed strict rules. Herbalists picked certain plants only by moonlight, believing this enhanced their sleep-promoting properties. Others had to be harvested at specific times of the year. A herbalist being fined for gathering valerian root in spring instead of autumn, when it was supposedly most potent. Medieval households often had their own sleep remedy gardens. Common people grew simple herbs like chamomile and mint, while wealthy estates maintained elaborate gardens with rare sleep-promoting plants. A noble family's garden lists exotic sleep aids imported from as far as Constantinople, though their steward noted that common chamomile works just as well, if my lady would only admit it. Pillow sachets were particularly popular. People would stuff small cloth bags with dried herbs and place them inside their pillowcases. Different combinations served different purposes: hops and lavender for deep sleep, rosemary and mint for those who needed to wake early. One inventory lists sleep sachets for the wealthy that contained exactly the same herbs as the regular ones, just in fancier bags and at triple the price. In hospitals, different wards would be scented with specific herbs depending on patients' conditions. The fever ward used cooling herbs like mint, while the recovery ward featured calming lavender. Another remarkable medieval text, the Herbalist's Night Watch, detailed specific preparations for different types of sleep difficulties. For those who couldn't fall asleep, it recommended a warm tea of chamomile and passion flower. For those who woke too early, a stronger blend of valerian and hops was prescribed. The guide even included a section on herbs for those who talk in their sleep, though it noted that sometimes the stories are too entertaining to cure. Some remedies combined herbs with specific actions. In 1478, recommends gentle brushing of the temples with rosemary-infused oil while reciting calming prayers. Another suggests washing feet in lavender water before bed, though one physician notes that the benefit might come more from washing the feet than from the lavender. The trade in sleep herbs created its own economy. Specialized herb gatherers would supply markets and apothecaries. Professional herb dryers also played a crucial role, as properly dried herbs were essential for winter use. These herbal traditions proved remarkably effective for most sleep troubles. There's this physician's guide note that says, "Sleep comes easily to those who trust in nature's remedies rather than fighting against the night." Monasteries even developed early versions of sleep clinics where people could stay for a few nights of herb-assisted rest. These sleep retreats combined herbal remedies with peaceful surroundings and regular schedules. People traveling from as far as 50 miles away for their sleep treatment, though they did note that the journey itself exhausts them enough to ensure good rest. While these gentle herbal approaches helped medieval people sleep, another aspect of their daily routine made falling asleep even easier. Late-night snacking simply wasn't a thing in medieval times, not because they didn't want to, but because they couldn't. Without refrigeration or artificial light, eating after sunset became more trouble than it was worth. This limitation, though born of necessity, actually gave medieval people a significant advantage when it came to sleep quality. Medieval households followed strict meal timing patterns. The main meal, called dinner, typically happened around midday. A lighter supper followed in the late afternoon, well before sunset. In 1465, dinner occurred at the sun's highest point, and supper when shadows grow twice as long as the objects casting them, natural indicators that kept meals properly spaced. Imagine trying to explain that timing system to someone wearing an Apple Watch. One particularly amusing dispute involved an innkeeper accused of serving food at ungodly hours. His defense? The guests were travelers from Spain who did not know proper Christian dining hours. The judge ruled that even foreign stomachs must follow local customs, perhaps the first instance of when in Rome, eat when the Romans eat. Medieval physicians observed that patients who ate late often suffered from troubled sleep and strange dreams. One doctor's guide warns against filling the belly when the sun has retired, claiming it led to everything from nightmares to indigestion. Another physician claimed that those who sup late rise late and their minds remain foggy like morning mist. Medieval for you're not you when you're hungry at midnight. Monastery kitchens adhered strictly to daylight-aligned eating schedules. The evening bell that signaled the day's final meal wasn't just about religious observance, it was a practical cutoff point for the kitchen staff. One rule explicitly stated that when vespers ring, the fires must die, no matter who remains hungry. Talk about a strict kitchen-closed policy. No amount of puppy dog eyes would get you a late-night snack. Working people followed similar rules. Craftsmen and laborers took their main meal during their midday break, with a smaller meal before heading home. One carpenter's guild even fined members for eating too close to bedtime, noting that a full belly makes clumsy hands come morning. Imagine losing a day's wages because you couldn't resist a midnight mutton leg. Monastery kitchens adhered strictly to daylight-aligned eating schedules. The evening bell that signaled the day's final meal wasn't just about religious observance, it was a practical cutoff point for the kitchen staff. One rule explicitly stated that when vespers ring, the fires must die, no matter who remains hungry. Talk about a strict kitchen-closed policy. No amount of puppy dog eyes would get you a late-night snack. Working people followed similar rules. Craftsmen and laborers took their main meal during their midday break, with a smaller meal before heading home. One carpenter's guild even fined members for eating too close to bedtime, noting that a full belly makes clumsy hands come morning. Imagine losing a day's wages because you couldn't resist a midnight mutton leg. The ban on late eating created interesting social customs. Evening gatherings focused on conversation and entertainment rather than food. Hosts who offered more than light drinks after sunset were considered either showing off or somewhat uncouth. Etiquette advised that evening visits are for fellowship, not feasting. The medieval equivalent of "we already ate, thanks." Food storage and preparation practices reinforced these eating patterns. Without reliable ways to keep food fresh or heat it easily, preparing late meals was impractical. Fires were typically banked for the night after the evening meal, and restarting them was too much work just for a snack. Some manor houses even had rules about when kitchen fires could be lit and extinguished, with strict penalties for unauthorized cooking, possibly the origin of the phrase, "not worth the trouble." Medieval kitchens were designed for large-scale, scheduled meal preparation. The absence of easily used individual cooking implements made impromptu meal preparation difficult. You couldn't just pop something in the microwave or order DoorDash from the neighboring castle. Frustrated traveling merchants often arrived at inns after sunset only to be offered a cup of ale, with innkeepers firmly stating that kitchens, like chickens, must rest when the sun does. A medieval version of, "Sir, this is a Wendy's, and we closed 10 minutes ago." Rural communities followed natural rhythms even more strictly. The day's final meal coincided with bringing in the animals for the night. This practical arrangement meant that by the time evening chores were done, the kitchen had long been cold. The cows got tucked in before humans could even think about a bedtime snack. Without late-night digestion to disturb their rest, medieval people typically slept more soundly. Patients who followed the usual mealtimes apparently recovered faster than those who ate irregularly. Perhaps the original "an apple a day at the appropriate solar position keeps the doctor away." Medieval kitchen staff finished their work well before dark. A cook proudly declared that "our members sleep as well as any, for our work ends when the day does." Though one apprentice did grumble about having to wake up before even the birds consider breakfast. Possibly history's first, not a morning person. The practice even influenced architecture. Medieval kitchens were often built separate from living quarters, making late-night food raids impractical. One noble house's renovation plans included the note, "Kitchen placed far enough from chambers to prevent midnight wanderings." Apparently, even the wealthy couldn't be trusted around a nearby pantry. Medieval aristocrats, they're just like us. Beyond just promoting better sleep, This eating pattern created another benefit medieval people never expected. Forget expensive gym memberships. Medieval people got their exercise simply by living. Daily life in medieval times involved constant physical activity, from dawn until dusk, naturally tiring out their bodies and preparing them for sound sleep. A typical farmer's day was essentially an intense full-body workout. These inadvertent fitness enthusiasts walked 10 to 12 miles per day just working their fields. Plowing an acre of land meant walking behind the plow for about 8 miles, pushing against resistant soil the entire time. Medieval CrossFit at its finest. Craftspeople had their own workout routines built into their trades. Blacksmiths essentially did arm day every day, swinging hammers that could weigh up to 10 pounds for hours, making modern dumbbells look like child's play. It took apprentices at least 3 months to build up the strength needed for a full day's work, and you could spot a blacksmith's apprentice by their slightly lopsided walk and perpetually sore arms. Even seemingly lighter work provided constant exercise. Medieval bread recipes demanded 30 minutes of continuous kneading per batch. The original upper body workout video, minus the spandex and peppy music. Weavers worked standing looms that required constant movement, often walking miles back and forth during a single day's work, wearing through shoes faster than a teenager at a growth spurt. The daily routines of textile workers were particularly demanding. Wool preparation alone involved hours of physical labor. Before a single thread could be spun, workers had to clean, card, and comb the raw wool. A full arm workout that would make any modern personal trainer jealous. New apprentices often couldn't lift their arms above their heads after their first week, giving textile muscle soreness a whole new meaning. The changing seasons brought different types of physical demands. Spring meant intense agricultural labor. Digging, plowing, and planting required constant bending and lifting. Nature's version of a seasonal gym membership. Summer brought its own challenges, with haymaking being particularly demanding. In 1467, haymaking meant sunrise to sunset swinging of the scythe. Fall harvest time was perhaps the most physically demanding season. Working against time and weather, people pushed their bodies to the limit. Communities came together for marathon sessions of reaping, binding, and stacking, the original group fitness class minus the matching outfits. When rain threatened, harvesters worked through the night by moonlight. Medieval nightclub, but with more productivity and less dancing. Winter didn't mean rest, it just meant different types of physical work. Threshing grain required rhythmic movements for hours on end, like an early version of Zumba, but with actual purpose. Woodcutting and hauling became a daily necessity, with one household requiring up to 40 pounds of wood daily just for basic heating and cooking. Who needs a gym membership when you have trees to chop? Children got plenty of exercise too, though not through organized sports. From age 7, they helped with household tasks like carrying water, gathering firewood, and herding animals. One schoolmaster from 1463 actually scolded parents for letting their children play too much instead of doing proper strength-building work. Possibly history's first fitness fanatic. Urban dwellers weren't exempt from this daily workout. Cities had few wheeled carts. Most goods were carried by hand or on backs through narrow streets. Apprentices regularly made 12 trips up and down 4-story buildings daily, carrying heavy loads, the original stairmaster with bonus weight training included. Water carrying alone provided significant exercise. Without indoor plumbing, the average household needed about 40 gallons of water daily. Town physicians observed water carriers developing notably one-sided muscle development. Medieval problems required medieval solutions, like specific exercises to balance the water carrier's lopsided frame. The nobility, despite their privileged position, couldn't escape physical activity entirely. Hunting, a favorite noble pastime, involved hours of riding, walking, and sometimes running. During 3-day hunts, participants covered over 30 miles on foot, while servants somehow managed double that distance, probably wondering who was really getting the better end of this noble pursuit. Medieval clothing itself encouraged movement. Without elastic or stretch materials, clothes had to be loose enough for work. Even the fanciest dresses needed to allow for lifting, reaching, and climbing stairs. Medieval fashion, form follows function, and function means being able to actually move. Travel meant walking. Lots of it. Merchants averaged 15 to 20 miles per day on foot. Distance calculations between towns came with practical footnotes. Subtract 2 miles if traveling alone, Add 3 if bringing apprentices with perpetually sore feet and endless complaints. Even leisure activities involved movement. Popular games included throwing contests, wrestling, and dance. Sunday afternoons often turned into impromptu sports competitions, much to the local clergy's dismay. The congregation was apparently more devoted to their games than their prayers, though both activities guaranteed a good sweat. This constant physical activity had a perfect side effect. By evening, medieval people were naturally tired. Their bodies had worked hard all day, making sleep come easily. Physical laborers rarely complained of sleeplessness, though there were plenty of complaints about sore muscles. Medieval people, accidentally inventing the perfect sleep routine while just trying to survive. But perhaps what's most interesting about medieval physical activity isn't the exercise itself. It's how little they worried about it. Medieval people didn't need to plan their workouts or count their steps. Movement was so deeply woven into daily life that they never gave it a second thought. The original functional fitness enthusiasts, before it was cool. Speaking of not overthinking things, medieval people had another secret to good sleep. Today, we're obsessed with sleep. We track it, analyze it, and worry about it constantly. I have a friend who spends more time checking her sleep stats than actually sleeping. The irony isn't lost on her expensive sleep tracking ring. Medieval people would have laughed at our modern sleep anxiety, and honestly, they'd have a point. Back then, sleep wasn't a project to be managed or a skill to be mastered. It was just sleep. No one in medieval times ever lay awake wondering if they were getting enough REM cycles or if their sleep score would be good enough to brag about at the market tomorrow. They didn't have sleep coaches, sleep podcasts, or sleep optimization workshops. They just had darkness, tired bodies, and the common sense to use both. A fascinating detail from a merchant's records shows how little they fussed about sleep. Between notes about wool prices and bread deliveries, he casually mentioned sleeping wherever and whenever he could during his travels, sometimes in beds, sometimes on benches, and once quite comfortably on a sack of grain. No mention of thread counts or pillow firmness ratings. In fact, he describes how different types of grain sacks offered varying levels of comfort, with wheat being preferable to barley. Medieval travel tips at their finest. The medieval approach to sleep was beautifully simple. When you're tired, you sleep. When you're not, you're awake. A revolutionary concept, right? They didn't need an app to tell them they were tired. Their bodies did that job just fine. Medieval monasteries show monks sometimes nodding off during late-night prayers, and rather than fighting it, they'd just take a quick nap. Abbott's solution? Moving the sleepy monks closer to the front where they could be gently prodded awake when needed. One monastery even mentions a particularly clever monk who developed a system of subtle elbow nudges to keep his brothers awake during important services. This relaxed attitude toward sleep actually helped them sleep better. Modern sleep research shows that anxiety about sleep is one of the biggest causes of sleep problems. The more you worry about not sleeping, the harder it becomes to sleep. A problem medieval people simply didn't have. They were too busy living to worry about sleeping. Take the story of a medieval innkeeper who kept a record of common complaints. While there were plenty of grumbles about hard beds, noisy roosters, and snoring travelers, there's not a single mention of insomnia. Not one person demanding a special pillow or complaining about their sleep quality. The biggest sleep-related complaint? People sleeping too long and missing breakfast. The innkeeper's logs show more concern about guests oversleeping than undersleeping. Imagine that being our biggest sleep worry today. Medieval medical texts reveal another surprising detail. They rarely treated sleep problems. While they had remedies for everything from toothaches to wandering spleens, sleep issues barely got a mention. When they did discuss sleep troubles, the usual prescription was simple. Work harder during the day. No meditation apps, no white noise machines, just good old-fashioned physical exhaustion. A medieval physician's notes simply state, "For those who cannot sleep, let them stack hay until their arms grow heavy." Direct and effective, if not exactly spa treatment material. Something that's really interesting is that medieval people actually had names for different types of rest. They didn't just sleep, they dozed, napped, and drowsed, each type of rest serving its own purpose. They understood something we've forgotten. Not all rest needs to be deep sleep. Sometimes a quiet moment by the fire was just as refreshing as a nap. These different levels of rest were so normal that medieval writings often mention people taking standing rests while working or fire drowses during winter evenings. Their attitude toward morning waking was equally relaxed. No one jumped out of bed ready to seize the day or felt guilty about being a night person. Dawn came when it came, and people woke up when they woke up. Unless you were responsible for lighting the manor's fires or milking the cows, your sleep schedule was your own business. Records from one medieval village show that different craftspeople started their days at different times, bakers before dawn, but weavers might not start until mid-morning. Nobody wrote productivity books about the perfect morning routine. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about medieval sleep was how unremarkable they found it. It wasn't a hobby, a health metric, or a status symbol. Nobody bragged about their superior sleep hygiene or wrote books about the perfect sleep protocol. Sleep was just another part of life, like breathing or blinking. The only time sleep patterns were even mentioned in most records was when they interfered with work or prayer. And even then, the solutions were practical rather than complicated. This approach might seem too simple to our modern sensibilities. Surely there must be more to it. But that's exactly the point. By not turning sleep into a complicated science project, medieval people avoided many of the sleep problems that plague us today. They didn't create problems by overthinking solutions. Their accidental genius was in treating sleep as natural and normal rather than something to be achieved or conquered. This medieval wisdom about not obsessing over sleep is now being rediscovered by modern sleep experts. They're finding that one of the best ways to improve sleep is to stop trying so hard to improve it. Medieval people knew this all along. They just didn't need to write a bestseller about it. In fact, the only time medieval people seemed to have worried about sleep was when someone was sleeping too much, considered a sign of laziness or illness. And perhaps that was their greatest insight of all, that worry-free sleep wasn't just about how or where you slept, but about having a mind as peaceful as those quiet medieval nights.